My favorite sewing memory has to do with my grandmother. When I was 5 years old, she taught me to sew.
Hi, my name is Cindy Hogan, and today we're going to cut out and embroider our appliques on a machine, all at one time. We're going to start in our software program and select the first piece of the applique. Then we'll click on our Color Attributes tab and change the color to applique material. The last thing that we're going to do is drag our applique piece up to the first sewing position. Click on our Home tab and send that design to our embroidery machine. Once we've got the design at the machine, we'll simply bring up the cutting section, place the hoop with the fabric laid on top of it into the machine, end our editing, press sewing, and start the machine. While that's cutting, we can get set up for our next piece. We're going to hoop a piece of stabilizer, place a 10 by 10 inch piece of fabric in the center of our hoop, and get ready to embroider the design. Now, this machine has 4 different cutting needles. Each of them are at a separate angle to make the cut line go better. If you don't have this at home, that's okay. You can still make this applique. You would simply let the first position sew and then take the hoop out of the machine and trim around as you normally would. The machine is really very interesting as far as when it cuts each of the blade angles, cut a different portion of the design. So it's all done cutting. We're going to remove the hoop from the machine and sit down here and pop out our applique pieces. They're all ready to cut. After we've got our applique pieces cut, we've got our other piece that's hooped. I'm going to adjust the machine here just a bit to accept this hoop. Place the hoop in the machine, and then bring up the other embroidery pattern. And I'm going to change a few colors. My black happens to be on needle number 5 and my red happens to be on needle number 6, so I need to do a little bit of adjustment. If I'm at home, I don't have to do this step. If I'm on a home market machine, all I have to do is basically switch out my threads, which is not a big deal. Now, we're all set up, we're ready to go, and we're going to press the start button to get it to embroider. The first thing that's going to embroider is a basting stitch. This will tack the fabric down to our stabilizer and kind of keeps the fabric from jumping around while the whole embroidery design is embroidering. The second thing that we're going to stitch is a candle wicking stitch, which is a decorative stitch to give the checkbook cover just a little something extra. After that, it will stitch our first piece of our applique, which is going to tell us where to lay down our cut applique pieces that we cut with our machine, or by hand if we had done it by hand. Okay. After the candle wicking stitch is done, then it's going to do the placement stitches for our dresses. One of the nice things about doing applique in this method is that you can iron on your stabilizer to the back of the fabrics before you cut them out, and then it makes it easy for you just to press the iron to them to tack them into place as you decide before you go to the next step. So as these are stitching, we're going to get our pieces ready to place. These are the 2 that we had earlier. I've got a little bit I've got scissors down here, and I'm going to snip off the little hairs just to make them a little bit prettier. And then we'll bring in the applique thing off the machine. Now we've got our applique placement stitches stitched here, and we're going to take off the backing off of our little applique pieces and lay them down in the correct side, making sure that the pieces line up with the lines that we stitched out. Once those are in place, we can press our iron to them to make sure that they'll stay in place when we stick them back into the embroidery machine. This is kind of a cheater's way of doing applique. It's about the only way I do applique anymore is to have my pieces pre-cut. Even if I'm doing it at home on a home machine instead of a large machine, I pre-cut my pieces. I'll print out my templates and I'll pre-cut them with my stabilizer on the back so that I can iron. I have a bad habit of cutting a hole in my garment when I try to do this in the when it's in the hoop with a pair of scissors. So our pieces are all placed down onto the and pressed into place. We're ready to place them back into the embroidery machine and start the machine up again. Then it'll do a little bit of an accent. We've got a small little window here that it's going to do just a little bit more of what we want it to do. After that is done, we'll move on to making our pockets. This is a unique project in that it's all done inside the hoop. The pieces of our pockets, I've cut two pieces of fabric that are approximately 7 by 5 inches wide, or 7 by 10 inches wide, excuse me, and folded in half, all right? I folded them in half and I pressed them to make our pocket pieces. After it's stitched all of the stitching, all of the accent stitches, the machine will stop and you'll take your pockets and you'll line them up with the edge of the basting stitch that you stitched first on each side. Make sure that you get the seam that you folded onto the inside. Otherwise, you'll have open holes instead of pockets. You're going to take your painter's tape, and so that those pockets don't shift around, you want to tape each side of them. Just kind of slap a little tape on those puppies. After you've got your pockets taped, you'll place that back into the machine and it will stitch the pockets in place. Once the pockets are stitched in place, as we have right here, you can take the painter's tape off or not, doesn't really matter. But we have another piece of fabric that we'll lay over the top to form the inside of our checkbook cover. Lay the inside piece down, and you can use the same tape that you used before. Tape it down. This time when the machine stitches, it's going to leave a slight opening for you to be able to turn your project through so that you can complete your checkbook cover. After that is stitched, you're ready to trim. So you grab your handy dandy cutting mat and your ruler here. And we're going to trim it about 1/4 of an inch around each side. Go ahead and use that basting stitch line to be able to cut with. Slice it across on all 4 sides. It's not a precise item. It doesn't have to be exactly 1/4 of an inch. You just want it to be nice and trim. I will, after this is done, go ahead and round my corners off with my scissors to make it just a little bit easier to turn and pop those corners out. You can also tear off the stabilizer off the back so it's not quite as stiff. If you like that to be on, that's not a problem. You can leave it there. Whatever suits your fancy. You'll take it and tear it away. But the cool thing is that you have a nice little hole here. So now we've got it. We're poking our holes back out. You want to make sure that you get all the corners popped out. And that's how you cut and embroider an applique checkbook cover in the machine.